Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at Elections Explained. I am so excited for you to be joining us this evening. I'm going to start off by introducing who I am. My name is Angela Enciso, and I'm the Director of People Experience at Teach for America DFW. What I do is I actually work with our staff to help develop learning and development. We also do a lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm just so excited to be here with you all to share a little bit more about what the elections are, what they mean, and how they impact our communities. I'm also excited to introduce my friend Robert.
Hello, Angela. Thank you to all of our guests and attendees this evening. Welcome. My name is Robert Carrion. I also am a staff member at Teach for America here in Texas. I'm a former teacher. I taught 10th grade world history for a few years. And now in my current role with Teach for America, I focus on government here in the state of Texas. So I'm very excited for the conversation and presentation this evening, and look forward to sharing a little bit what we know about elections and hearing questions from you all, our student attendees.
Yes, thank you so much, Robert. Like Robert said, we work at Teach for America, and Teach for America is a leadership organization. We help educators be better leaders for kids and students just like you every single day. We are so happy to be able to share this event with you for free. Thanks to the members of the Partners of Teach for America, of teachers and alumni who generously support our work.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. And because of that generous support, we've been able to plan this family discussion and to do it in a socially distanced way as is required by our current moment, because we know that kids and families have a lot of questions about what is happening in our country and what elections mean for them. I'm a father, I'm a parent. I have a 7-year-old second grader and a 5-year-old kindergartner. And the past few months have been filled with many questions about the elections, and most specifically the presidential elections. And tonight's call is an opportunity for us to focus on kids, to focus on students, to focus on learners who are the future of our country, and who one day will hopefully be active participants in elections and in the democratic project. Because we have kids and children here with us this evening, for your safety and their safety, we have not turned on the camera function for attendees. So you will not be able to turn on your camera. And we have also set this up where you will not be able to come off of mute to talk with us this evening. But you will be able to use the chat function, and we have a couple different opportunities this evening where we'll ask you, as we already have, to chat in comments. And when you chat in comments, only the members of the Teach for America team that are here with us this evening supporting this call will be able to see those. As we get towards the end of our time together this evening, we're going to open up the floor for questions. And to do that, students, you're going to be using the question and answer or Q&A feature to submit those questions that you may have about elections and about what's happening in your community. We're very happy to share this time with you. We thank you all for being here this evening, and we thank our generous supporters at Partners of Teachers and Alumni who have supported this work. So, at the very highest level, elections are really about voting. And voting is one of the most fundamental rights and privileges of the form of government that we live in the United States, which is known as a democracy. And voting is an action whereby a person who is eligible to vote gets to make their voice known. Sometimes you may vote for a person that may be running for office. You may be voting for a law that you want your community to adhere to. You may also be voting for something called taxes, which raise money in order for our communities to provide essential services like streets and police and firemen. There are a number of different requirements for what it means to be an eligible voter. And on the screen here, if we could go back one more slide, sorry, I'd like to give an overview of what some of those have been in time and talk a little bit about how these have changed over time. So there have been requirements to vote in our country around gender for male or female. There have been requirements around age. There have been requirements around poll taxes. It used to, in some parts of our country, cost money for somebody to actually vote. There also used to be literacy tests. A person would have to sit down and take a test and prove that they knew how to read and write in order to be allowed to vote. There's also, in some states, restrictions on voting based on criminal convictions. So if someone has been convicted of a crime, they may lose their right to vote for a period of time. And there are also requirements for voting around specific voting locations. You have to be able to show up at a particular time and place to vote, or in some cases, and we saw a lot of this in this current election, be able to receive and send mail to vote. And there are also requirements in some states around providing certain forms of identification, like a driver's license or another type of ID card in order to vote. Now, who is eligible to vote, according to many of these categories, has changed quite considerably over the history of the United States. When our country was founded in 1776, and in the earliest forms of election in our country, only a very small portion of the people that lived here were eligible to vote. And those were men who were white that owned land. And over the course of our nation's history, the eligibility at its most fundamental level of who can vote has changed quite dramatically. In the 1870s, immediately following the Civil War, the 14th and 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution were ratified. The 14th Amendment gave the right to vote to all citizens of the United States who were men. So the requirement to own land was no longer included. And the 15th Amendment specifically granted the right to vote to Black men who were newly freed and made citizens following the end of the Civil War. It wasn't for another 50 years until the 1920 that the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified, which afforded women the right to vote. However, even though these laws were the law of the land, ratified in the U.S. Constitution, there were still many restrictions in many communities across our country, which prevented Black men and Black women from voting up until the middle parts of the 1900s. And in 1964, there was a very significant law that was passed by our national government called the Voting Rights Act, and that eliminated multiple forms of voter restrictions, including those poll taxes and many other forms of voter eligibility that I referenced earlier. Now, there are lots of different elections that people in our country get to vote for. Some are at what we call the national level. Our nation's capital is in Washington, D.C. And at the national level, as we saw last week, voters can vote for the president and the vice president. They can also vote for the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, which are collectively known as Congress. At the state level, and our state capital in Texas is in Austin, our voters in Texas can vote to elect our governor and our lieutenant governor. We also elect in Texas to elect members of the Texas House of Representatives and the Texas Senate. And at a local level, there are even more elections for more elected offices. At the local level, in an individual city, we vote for our mayor. and we vote for members of our city council. In a given county, which is a political unit that is a collection of cities and unincorporated areas, we vote for county judges and county commissioners in Texas. And that's probably the most accessible level to all of us is our school boards. Our school boards are voted by members of a given community in a given area, in a neighborhood sometimes. And those school board members we're going to talk a little bit more about here in a moment as we discuss how they impact the experiences that you all have as individual students in our schools. It is very important for you all to remember that voting is a fundamental right of our democracy. Our democracy depends on people actively participating in the elections process and voting. And in addition to the Voting Rights Act, in 1964, another major and important change to our voting laws came in 1971 with an amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which lowered the voting age from 21 years old to 18 years old. So as of today, U.S. citizens who are 18 years or older can vote, and that is regardless of your family history, the language you speak at home or the culture you practice, or your family income. Voting is truly a fundamental right, and it is the bedrock of the government that we live in the United States, called a democracy. Voting is a multi-step process, though. We can't just show up on election day and expect to be able to vote. We must first register to vote and prove that we meet all of the eligibility requirements, which most fundamentally are citizenship, and in some elections, residence. You have to live in a certain community to vote for some of these offices. There's a first round of elections, which are called primary elections. These allow us to go from a large number of candidates to a much smaller number of candidates. And then there is something called the general election. Last week in November was the general election. That was kind of the final stage of the voting process, where voters are actually participating in voting. And following the election day, there's a process of counting the votes and certifying or proving that the votes are accurate and the counts are accurate. This is a multi-step process. And for the general election that happened last week on November 3rd, vote counting and vote certification will actually continue for another full month after Election Day. So that counting and certification process actually will continue until early December for the elections that just happened in our state and in our country. There are other important characteristics of the presidential election, which you may be hearing a lot about in the news or in your home or school, and that's called the Electoral College. The Electoral College is a way of organizing votes for president, where every single state has a set number of votes that they can allocate to the presidential election. And states award their votes to the candidate who won the most votes for president in that state. And based on preliminary counts of votes across all of our states in the country, it looks to be the case that Joe Biden, if the votes currently stand as we predict they will have enough votes in the Electoral College to be named the next president of the United States. So in the news, you may be hearing Joe Biden referred to as the president-elect. It is important to remember, however, that this certification process is still ongoing through December the 3rd. And on December the 14th, that is the date at which the electors from all of the states across the country will cast their vote for their state to elect the next president of the United States. The Electoral College is not something new, however. It is something that you have seen. There's my daughter, Anna, coming to join. She just got in from soccer practice. Phone there. Thank you, sweetheart. The Electoral College happens every election, and it's been a part of every presidential election since the first presidential election in our nation's history. One of my colleagues is going to chat in a link via the chat function to an interactive feature that gives you the opportunity to explore the Electoral College over our nation's history. For those of you that have the ability to, we're going to give you a second to click on that link called the PBS Electoral Decoder and take just a moment to look at how the Electoral College have allocated their votes to presidents over the course of our nation's history. We're showing you what this tool looks like on the screen right now. And as you can see, as you slide the slider across the bottom or click a date for a presidential election, you can see how different candidates for president have secured electoral votes over our nation's history. So we'll pause just for a few more moments for those of you that are getting into the tool to explore it. And we hope that on your own time, you take some chance to actually go through and look at how this important function of our democracy has helped elect presidents over the course of our nation's history. Following the Electoral College, there is another very important step in the elections that just happened, and most specifically, that is Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C. on January 20th. That is the day that the next president of the United States will be inaugurated and will formally take office. This historically has been a very large event, a great celebration of our nation's principles of democracy and the right of people to choose who their leaders are. We don't quite know what inauguration will look like in 2 months' time, given the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. But it is true that on January 20th, 2021, our nation will inaugurate our next president for the next 4 years. This has been a very short overview of the election process and the rights of voters in our country. We're going to take a brief pause to give you all a brain break before we continue on the conversation of elections and what they mean for you.
Wow. That was such a fun video. I know for me, I really enjoyed that little brain break. And it just got me really excited and happy about continuing this conversation. And it also just got the emotions going on. So as we move into this next part, I just wanted to spend a couple of seconds with this pop quiz question. And don't worry, we're not grading you. We just want to know if you know who is your elected official that represents you on the school board. So if you can use the chat function, share with us if you know what is the name of your school board trustee. And we'll give folks a few seconds to write in their answers. And no worries if you don't know who your trustee is. We're going to actually spend some time and share some resources later after this call for you to actually figure out who is your school board trustee and who represents you on the school board. So as Mr. Roberts shared earlier, there are so many different types of elections that happen all the time. Besides the president, there are different elections that happen at the state level and the local level, along with at the national level. Today, in this moment, we're actually going to focus on the elections that happen here locally, and even more specifically, on school board elections that really impact our schools and students just like you. So, here in North Texas, we have different types of elections. Again, they could be people that you vote for, including the mayor, your city officials, county judges, and again, the school board. The school board is a very special election. Each part of town is assigned a school board member that makes decisions for your area school. What do elections have to do with school? They have a lot to do with the schools and the decisions that are made that impact you every day. So, first, votes help to elect the next school board trustee. These school board are created of teams of people that help to create different rules and different decisions that really help to impact what happens at your school. They could be decisions about who can be a teacher, the subjects that are taught at school, and even the funding that helps to cover our school lunches. There are lots of things that can impact the decisions that are made, and our school board members have a big role in making those decisions with us. And now I'd really love to take a couple of minutes to actually share a little bit of this monumental moment in time. As we know, Kamala Harris is the first woman to be elected the vice president. This is the highest government job a woman has ever achieved. Not only that, she is also the first Black person and South Asian person to be a US vice president, which is huge. It's amazing, and it's so cool to be living in this moment. So we're gonna actually take a few moments to listen to her message and hear what she has to say.
So, friend who we remember here today. And to my husband, Doug, and our children, Cole and Ella, and my sister Maya, and our whole family, I love y'all more than I can ever express. We are so grateful to Joe and Jill for welcoming our family into theirs on this incredible journey. And to the woman most responsible for my presence here today, my mother, Shamala Gopalan Harris, who is always in our hearts. When she came here from India at the age of 19, she maybe didn't quite imagine this moment, but she believed so deeply in an America where a moment like this is possible. And so I am thinking about her and about the generations of women, Black women, Asian, white, Latina, Native American women, who throughout our nation's history have paved the way for this moment tonight. Women who fought and sacrificed so much for equality and liberty and justice for all, including the Black women who are often, too often, overlooked, but so often prove they are the backbone of our democracy. All the women who have worked to secure and protect the right to vote for over a century, 100 years ago with the 19th Amendment, 55 years ago with the Voting Rights Act, and now in 2020 with a new generation of women in our country who cast their ballots and continued the fight for their fundamental right to vote and be heard. Tonight I reflect on their struggle, their determination, and the strength of their vision to see what can be unburdened by what has been. And I stand on their shoulders. And what a testament it is to Joe's character that he had the audacity to break one of the most substantial barriers that exists in our country and select a woman as his vice president. But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last. Because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities. And to the children of our country, regardless of your gender, our country has sent you a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before. But know that we will applaud you every step of the way.
Wow, what an inspirational video. Every time I watch that, it gives me the chills and just makes me so excited about this historical moment. And also the message that it sends to little girls and boys who never thought that they'd see themselves represented in in such a high position, such as the presidency or the vice presidency. So I'm just so excited. And I think this is such an important conversation for us to continue to have with students about the importance of your role in this democratic process. As a former pre-K through first grade teacher myself, I really enjoyed talking about this with my students because it really allowed my students to see themselves as having a very strong voice and a voice that mattered. We would practice in mock elections in our classroom, whether it was choosing which one was the best fruit or your favorite ice cream flavor. And just participating in that and being able to share your favorite item or topic was just such a great experience for students to get to practice and know that not only does their preference or their voice matter, but it can actually make a difference. So for me as a mother now of a 2-year-old and also as an aunt of many students your age, I'm just so excited to continue having this conversation with students and to continue ensuring that you have a space to ask questions, that you have a space to be curious, and also to share your thoughts. Your voice and your thoughts really matter, especially when it comes to decisions that impact you at your schools and in our community. So again, why this is important? Because you are impacted by these decisions and you have the opportunity to actually share the things that matter to you, whether it's to your parents, to your teachers, to your school administrators. We do care and we want to continue to impart this belief that your voice matters and it will make a difference. I'd also love to turn it over to Mr. Robert to share a little bit more about why this conversation matters to him.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. As I shared earlier, voting is the bedrock of democracy. Voting is rooted in the idea that people should choose the laws that they live under and the people to lead them. And this is the fourth presidential election in my lifetime that I've had a chance to participate in. And every 4 years in a presidential election, our country really has an opportunity to define who we are through that voting process. And the people that I have voted for in these presidential elections have not always won, but still, it is important for me, and it's important for my children and for the students in our schools to know that whether or not your person wins, your choice wins, it still deeply matters that you continue to have faith and trust in the election process, and that you view future elections and the continued opportunity to vote as a fundamental right and at the core of what it means to be a citizen in our country. As my children, as I shared earlier, were asking lots and lots of questions, my hope is that all of the children in our communities across our state and across our country are asking similar types of questions about elections and about voting and about the people that are running for office, because it is only by raising children and teaching our children, our students, to participate in democracy, that we have hope that our country will continue to be as strong as it has been in the past, so that it can continue to be as strong in the future.
Thank you. That was very well stated, Mr. Robert. Now we're actually going to move into our kids Q&A, time for questions and answers. For the remainder of our time, we will be taking questions from kids only. Using the Q&A feature, write your first name, your grade, the city where you live, and your question. Robert and I will answer them for you.
Great. Angela, I see one in the chat. Do you want to give a first shot at that one?
Yeah, so we got our first question from a student. Her name is Astrid. She's from Fort Worth and she's in the 3rd grade. And she asked, how did everyone know who to vote for? That is such a great question, Astrid. So people get to actually learn about the different candidates before they go to vote at the polling locations. And you can actually do this in many different ways. Some of the races, like the presidential races, are televised, and you get to listen to their speeches. You can actually listen to their debates. And then there are other local elections, like the school board that we talked about, where those you can learn about them through local news or even newspapers. There are also voter guides that help to provide some information about the candidates, their policy beliefs, and their stances on different things. So I think it's really important that you try to find out as much information as possible about a candidate before you show up to the polls, and do as much research as possible. This time around, there were a lot of candidates on the ballot. And I know that there are lots of different resources and organizations that try to put out as much information about each candidate so that you can do as much research as possible before you go to the polls. But that's usually how most people make their decisions. Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. I will take the next one. The next question we have comes in from Merrick, who's a 2nd grader from Fort Worth. Merrick asks, why are some states red and some states blue? And this is just like such a beautiful 2nd grade question, Merrick. I love this question. As you all saw earlier when we showed you some of the maps and we were talking about the Electoral College, you saw some states that were colored red and some states that were colored blue. And maybe you've heard about red states or blue states in the news, or your parents, or even read about them. And I don't know how this started, but the colors refer to the two major political parties in our country. Political parties are organizations that try to advance a certain set of ideas for how they think the country should be run. And the two major political parties in our country are the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Now, I don't know if it was one person or a group of people who decided that the Democratic Party would be referred to by the blue color and the Republican Party would be referred to by the red color. But somebody or a group of people made that decision. See, I have some visitors maybe. When we see on that map that Texas is the color red, all that means is that more people in the state of Texas voted for the Republican presidential candidate, which in this election was Donald Trump, than voted for the Democratic presidential candidate, which in this case was Joe Biden. Some states are oftentimes or maybe called purple states. For those of you that know your color wheel, you know red and blue make purple. So when a state is referred to as a purple state, that just means that it's a very close split between the number of people that may vote for a Republican candidate, which is represented by red, and the number of people that might vote for a Democratic candidate, which is represented by blue. Great question, Merritt.
Yeah, such a great question. I know we have another question, and this question is from Michael, who is from Cedar Hill, and he's a kindergartner, which is that's the grade levels that I taught, so this is exciting. And such a great question. How can I become the president? That is a beautiful question, and there are some rules to becoming the next president. And as Mr. Roberts shared, just like there are eligibility rules for voting, there are also eligibility rules for becoming the president. And one of those is being a natural born US citizen. You also have to be a minimum of 35 years old. So, Michael, you cannot become the president just yet, but when you turn 35 at the very least, you will actually become eligible to become the next president. And also, I think it's really important to say that if you want to become the next president, it's also important to continue to invest in and continue learning in your school. Try to meet as many people as possible and do the work of learning more and more about your community. Get involved. You can do community service. You can work with different organizations and just become more involved with what's happening in your community so you can understand the issues that impact the community. But I love this question, Michael, and I hope that you continue to dream big because you one day could be our next president. And then it looks like we have another question from Gavin Garcia, who is a first grader in Dallas. And I'm going to pass this question on to you, Robert. What does the elephant and the donkey represent?
Oh, all right. Great question, Gavin. So you maybe saw on political signs in your neighborhood, or maybe in cartoons or the news or the internet, that some candidates appear with a picture of a donkey, and some candidates appear with a picture of an elephant. And just like the colors red and blue are used to signify the political parties, so too do the donkey and the elephant symbolize the Democratic and the Republican Party. And I am just right now reading about the history of this, and it looks like it was in the 1800s, right? So over 150 years ago, most likely, that a journalist, a political cartoonist, who was describing the politics at the time, started to represent candidates from the Democratic Party as donkeys, and started to represent candidates from the Republican Party as elephants. And I don't know how this journalist chose those two animals as representation, But again, that tradition has continued to this day, and candidates who are associated with the Republican Party usually have, if they have a symbol of an elephant, and candidates from the Democratic Party usually represent that with the symbol of a donkey. But great question there, Gavin. Thank you so much for your inquiry.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Thank you. We have another question from Zion, who's a third grader in Dallas. And this question is, how often does the election happen? And this is a really great question because, as we said, there are many types of elections that happen. Um, the most prevalent one that most people know about is the presidential election. And that actually happens every 4 years because that elected leadership position has a term length of 4 years. Um, like we said, other types of elections also happen. So the U.S. states or the U.S. senator would actually be every 6 years, whereas the state treasurer would be every 4 years. And then locally, some of our school board trustee positions are actually every 2 years. And like we said, elections happen all of the time. So what we just went through was an election cycle, but following next year in May, we'll actually go through local elections as well. So you can actually continue to participate and learn more about elected leaderships year round. And we hope that you continue to also learn the importance of our local elections. Um, as we said, the school board elections are coming up again in May. So we hope that you and your parents continue to stay informed and just continuing to learn more about who are the candidates and what positions they're actually running for, because you can participate in those year long. So thank you for that question, Zion.
All
Robert?
right, Angela, I will take the next one. It comes from Julian from Dallas, who is a sixth grader, who asks, why do we need the Electoral College? This one is one that I will admit I am not 100% clear on, but here are some of the things that I have heard. I will share them with you. And maybe one thing we could do, Angela, is when we send information out to our attendees, we can include some resources so that our students and participants can research a little bit more on the history of the Electoral College. My understanding is that the Electoral College was first implemented, remember, all the way back in the first presidential election in our country, for a few reasons. One is it was a way to balance out the difference between the voting population of a state and the actual population of a state. You'll recall that in our nation's early stages, only white men who owned land could vote. But there were many more people that lived in our country than just white landowning men. There were women, there were Black people, there were Native Americans. The Electoral College was an attempt to assign votes to the president that more closely matched the population of the people that lived in the state than the people that could actually legally vote. Another thing that I have heard is that the technology for voting in earlier stages of U.S. history was not as sophisticated as it is today. You know, now we vote by computer in Texas. When I voted last week, I went and I made my selections on a computer. Well, computers are a 20th century invention. They're less than 100 years old. And in earlier time, the Electoral College, I have heard, was used as a way to make it easier to try and count the votes that would need to be counted up to elect our president. So the Electoral College, again, is a process by which states assign votes to candidates for president based on the number of votes that are delivered to that candidate by all of the voting citizens in that given state.
Awesome. That was great, Robert. And we will definitely continue to share some resources so that you can have some of these questions answered as well. Our next question is actually from Eric. He's a second grader here in Dallas. And this question is, how do you get selected to run for president? That's a really great question. I know earlier we said that there are some requirements for a presidential candidate, but there are also different parts that Mr. Robert actually shared earlier, and that is through the primary and the caucus system that exists. And also, you get to become elected. So you actually have to go out, canvass the areas or the states that you're running in. And as a president, you'd be running for the entire United States. So you would actually go out and try to meet and talk to as many people as possible. Again, it's really important for you to make some connections with folks and really understand what the needs are. As you're running for this office, you also want to make sure that you understand what people need in their communities and how you will actually be able to impact and make decisions that will help those communities. So, one of the big processes is actually going out and campaigning. So once you campaign and get to know different people in different states, they actually get to participate in voting for you. And if you have the majority of the votes, then you actually get to move on into the next round, which is the general election. And again, you're going to continue to do that, and you participate in different things like debates. You share your answers and responses to different policy questions. And again, it's the whole point is to help convince and to get people to believe in you and your beliefs and your policies, so that they can vote for you on election day. And that is in short term the process.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, Eric, for that question. The next question we have is from Darian, who is in fourth grade from Frisco. Darian asks, when will Joe Biden be the president? As we shared earlier, Darian, based on all of the information that we have right now, it looks as though Joe Biden has enough votes to win the Electoral College and is therefore on a path to be elected president. If all of that continues to stay the same, and there are no major changes as the votes continue to be counted and the votes are certified or proved to be accurate, and the Electoral College happens on December the 14th, and Joe Biden clears 270 votes in the Electoral College, then he will formally become the president-elect. And the inauguration day is on January 20th, 2021. So just over 2 months from now, on the inauguration day, the individual, and in this case, it looks to be Joe Biden, will be sworn in as the President of the United States for a term of 4 years. And the same will hold true for the Vice President. We saw Ms. Senator Kamala Harris speaking just a moment ago, and she is also on track to be the elected Vice President to also be sworn in on January the 20th, 2021.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Robert. And we're actually going to move to this next question, which kind of ties really nicely with this last question that you answered. And this question is from Emily. She's a fifth grader from Dallas. And she asked, what does concede mean? And what happens if President Trump does not concede? So you've probably heard this used in the news. You've probably seen this in some news articles or even family or friends talking about it. The word concede actually just means to acknowledge or to accept that something is true. And in this case, it means that the opponent would have to actually acknowledge and agree that the results are true. And whether President Trump concedes or not, there is still a process that we're going to continue to follow. As Mr. Robert shared, in December, the Electoral College will make their election, and then on January 20th, the inauguration day will continue to happen. And that is when our next president will be inaugurated and moved into office. So there are different, while conceding is a part of the process, it is not a necessary part, but it is a part that is practiced in general and just traditionally. But there, again, there is a legal process that we have always followed and will continue to follow, whether there is a concession or not. Great question.
Great. All right, we have one more come in from Alexa, who is a fourth grader in Fort Worth. And the question is, why can't kids vote? It's a great question, Alexa. And I guess the best way I can explain it is to give you an example, not for, let's say, the presidential election, but in my house, I shared I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. They get to choose some things, and other things their mom and I get to choose. So, for example, we let them choose a couple nights a week what we're going to have for dinner. They usually choose one of a few different things. Pizza, hamburgers and hot dogs are really popular. Ribs, very popular in our house. Chicken nuggets, very popular in our house. The thing you'll notice about all of those is there's not a lot of fruits and vegetables. And while those are all and can be healthy foods, we know that it's very important to have a well-rounded diet that includes lots of fruits and vegetables. And so while our kids can make some decisions in our house around what we eat, they can't quite yet make all of the decisions. And I think the rationale behind a voting eligibility requirement of being 18 years old helps ensure that the people who vote have enough experience and understanding of the world to help inform the decision that they would make for who they think should run an elected office, whether it be the president or all the way, to the more local example of the school board. So currently the voting age in the United States is 18 years old. And once someone turns 18 years old and they meet other residency or citizenship requirements, then they are eligible to vote.
Thank you so much for answering that. Our next question, and this actually might be our last question, but this is a question from Kai, who is a sixth grader from Richardson. And their question is, do you know what it's like to run for office? And this is actually a really special question. So thank you for asking, Kai, because yes, I do know what it's like to run for office. I actually just recently ran for a local position here in Dallas. And I can speak to the experience as being just a really awesome learning experience. I got to meet so many people in my community, got to learn so much about what they care about, the things that matter most to them, and really just want to continue to do this work even outside of this election. I can share a little bit more about what the experience is like. You have to, like I said, you have to go out and campaign and meet people, talk to them. You also have to raise money so that you can reach more people, especially in this moment during COVID, where you can't necessarily meet one face to face with a lot of folks just to ensure that you keep yourself and others safe. But you can engage in conversations via social media. You can do Facebook conversations. You can make phone calls. And it's honestly just a really cool experience to participate in. And I'm really excited to continue to see young folks, just like y'all, grow up to one day run for office, because I truly do believe that even though you may not be at the age where you can vote, I truly believe that you have a voice that matters and that you actually are going to be the future of our country. You are going to help make some really important decisions that impact us and future generations. So I know this was Kai. Kai, if you ever want to learn what it's like to run for office, I will make sure and share my information so that when you're ready to do it, I am going to be so excited to share and be there rooting for you.
Yay. Thank you for taking that step, Angela, to put yourself out there to run for office. We need more of that in our country, I think. We have one last question that just came in from the Q&A from David, who's a third grader in Dallas. How do you all know we need 270 votes to win the election? So I've said 270 votes in the Electoral College. This is why. So the number of votes that each state get is the same as the number of representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives. There's 538 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, and each state gets those based on its population of citizens in its state. Half of 538 is 269, which is one less than 270. So if a candidate for president wins 270 of the 538 votes in the Electoral College, then they have what's called a majority. So that's how we arrive at the number 270. It's a simple majority of the number of total electoral votes available for the whole country. Great question, David.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much for that awesome last question, David. I know that we've actually come to our closing time, and I'm really sad about that. But I also am just so grateful for this opportunity. I want to thank you for joining our call tonight. We want to continue having these family discussions to help you understand the world around you and the impact that you can make.
Thank you all for being here with us.
Parents, we are also proud to be able to provide services like these free of charge. And thanks again to the generosity of our PTA. You can go to tfapta.org to learn how you can become a member. Or you can go to teachforamerica.org/donate and make sure to choose DFW. Thank you again and good night.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.